Everyone deals with painful emotions, and the process to gaining emotional healing can be daunting. Today, I'm going to be speaking on healing trauma, and I'll begin with explaining what trauma is, and then what healing is, and where we can meet. I know that for the last couple of years after the lockdown, the word trauma has become very rampant. Like everybody's talking about trauma. And then someone is asking, what is really trauma? All right. Trauma is what happened inside of you because of the experience you had, because of the disempowering exposure that you had. All right. And so today, by reason of this broadcast, I'm going to be narrowing it down to certain experiences that are very familiar to us. Okay. And so emotional healing is actually a process. It is a roadmap. Okay. It is our ability to navigate through different hurdles that will eventually give us the freedom of expression, freedom to become self-aware, freedom to become entwined in receiving, accepting, and enjoying life experiences. Okay? What trauma does to us or in our brain is that it disconnects us from being present in the moment and from enjoying our everyday life experiences and interaction. All right. And so trauma disconnects us from being fully immersed in the joy of every moment. I see trauma as an injury, an emotional or psychological injury, all right, that you feel. Okay, for example, you have an injury on your hand. I was somewhere recently, and I was introduced to the people I was teaching counseling, a group of counselors. Yes, we're having a teaching. I was introduced as a physiotherapist. Yes, the doctor that deals with the bones. Yeah, and then I had to, after a while, set the record straight. I'm a psychotherapist, and we deal more with the human brain, human relationship, and interaction with both our brain and each other. All right. And so, for trauma can mean an emotional wound that you have. Emotional healing is the process of accepting our life experiences as yes, it happened, acknowledging these experiences as yes, it happened, and I acknowledge that it happened to me, right? And then being able to articulate these experiences in a way that you exhume the effect of this experience from your body. Because every time you experience a traumatic event, your body keeps the score, your body keeps the count. So I've heard a couple of people say things like, but you experienced this when you were probably 10 years or 15 years or when you were a child, right? And so by now you should have become too used to it, or you should have risen above it. You do not just rise above an injury or a wound that has not been tended to. So when you hear somebody say something like your inner child, what they mean by that is that probably as a child or in a phase in your life, there's something you experienced that experience was not processed. All right. You didn't have the ability to process it because it was so disempowering and daunting. You couldn't express it, right? You couldn't process it, right? And so it left an inner injury in your mind, okay, in your soul, and you're unable to move from that point, and that has formed a neural pathway in your brain. What are neural pathways? An experience will cause a mark, or will cause a pathway, or will cause a way of life that your brain has learned to cope or respond to stimuli. All right. And so imagine you have an injury. As I said, trauma is like an injury. Imagine you have an injury on your wrist, and on that wrist, you wear a wristwatch to cover. And everybody that passes by you, say you go to the market, you're exposed, and somebody just passed by to say hello, or just calmly touched your wrist to say hello, and all you do is the person that passed by you had very good intentions, probably. They wanted to tap you to just say hello. But because you have an internal wound that nobody sees, that wound is responsible for your response and your reactions. So it's not because you wanted to respond the way you have been responding, but it's simply because of what happened to you that has not been processed, that has not been articulated, that has not been acknowledged. And so you seem not to have moved from that point. And so your inner child is still at that point of brokenness. What healing does for you is that it helps you grow, okay? It helps you acknowledge that experience, process the experience, and hands over to you tools that you can use to navigate your everyday life, to ensure that you start enjoying your everyday life. You're able to cope with triggers, all right? You are able to cope with people's expressions of love to you, expressions of communication to you in such a way that you both enjoy honest, open, and authentic relationships. All right. So there are different stages of healing from trauma. All right. So I'll just take the next few seconds to talk about the stages of healing from trauma. I've heard people say that, say different things. I've heard different patterns of, oh, this is how to heal. These are the stages. These are not the stages. But I'm going to begin, by the sake of this, for the course of this conversation today, I'll begin different. What do I mean different? So some people say that healing trauma starts with acknowledgement. All right. Other people say that healing trauma starts with acceptance. Okay. However, I say that healing trauma starts with the awareness and curiosity. Why do I say that? There are a lot of people that do not know that they've experienced trauma. But you realize that you have a mindset about things, mindset about how people should respect you, how people should talk to you, how people should not talk to you, how people should communicate with you. And you have all of these things, do and don'ts and preferences, have probably caged you in a box. And you're not able to express yourself. You're not able to connect to people authentically because that box had become a barrier to authentic connection with people. Considering the fact that we all grew up in different environments, exposed to probably different religions, exposed to probably different kinds of family, exposed to probably different kinds of love language. And so in this kind of case, it will be difficult for you to have people speak to you in your own love language, except probably they've spent time with you, or they are particularly interested in you, in your growth, in your welfare. And those kind of people might be categorized to probably family. I mean, very aware family members, or probably our friendships, our close friendships, and probably our spouses. But you also agree with me that a lot of our spouses these days do not even know how to behave around us. So it is something that has to be learned, all right? Being able to cope with you in a way that you both enjoy yourself is something that has to either be tolerated or learned. So the purpose of healing is to ensure that it doesn't matter what orientation whoever has coming around you, you are able to enjoy an authentic connection with that person. So we go back to the stages of healing. My first stage for me is awareness. At this stage, you have to be able to, your mind has to be able to come to the fact that, oh, something happened to me, or, oh, I can enjoy life better. I can see life differently, okay? But what is making me not to see life differently? And then you go in depth to find out, maybe it's the exposure you had as a child. Maybe it's the way someone treated you. Maybe it's just the religious orientation you had. Maybe it's the way your parents reacted to you. Maybe it's an abuse that happened to you while as a child, while working somewhere, or while under somebody's supervision. All right. And so by the time you become aware of that, you can now go to the next stage of acknowledgement, saying that now there are a lot of people you meet that have probably forgotten the experience they had as children, but they realize that they are disconnected with themselves. They are disconnected with their emotions. They are disconnected with their spouse. They are unable to have normal, what people term as normal social interactions with people, simply because of the experience they've been exposed to, they had, that caused either a soul wound, a psychological wound, or an emotional wound. All right. And so this next stage, which is acknowledgement, you must bring yourself to the facts, where to the place where you sit down and say, now that I'm aware that probably trauma happened to me, you have to now find out what kind of trauma was I exposed to. And at this stage, one of the people that can help you honestly is a therapist, an experienced emotional recovery therapist. Now, we have counselors that can speak to you honestly. We have counselors that can help you probably cope. But for you to dissect, go back to this is what I experienced, is only a specialist that can guide you back to that path of remeeting yourself and remembering exactly where you faced what you face. Taking you to that point will give you an authentic experience. I mean, you will go back to, oh, this is it. It will be, you will be so certain that this is what I experienced, okay, or this is what I was exposed to, all right, that has given me this injury, and now I can take the next steps because you have acknowledged. So now you can now take the next steps with the knowledge that you have. Why is it important that you have to acknowledge? Because anything that is not acknowledged, it is difficult. So how do you attend to it? How do you attend to a book or a phone? How do you navigate a phone that you do not know what make it is? So what do you look for, right? How do you ask questions? How can you be guided on something that you have no knowledge about, or you've not named, or you've not acknowledged? That's the reason why you have to go back to history, all right, to find out what exactly was I exposed to, all right? It's only a specialist that can guide you in this area. Oh, this is what we can look at, this is what we can look at. So we are not dealing with, you're certain that you're not dealing with a spectrum of issues, you're dealing with specifics, except of course, you have experienced complex trauma, okay, which is an exposure to more than one situation of disempowering experience, okay? There are people like that have had numerous exposures to trauma, and so in a stage in their life, they totally lose connection with life because this exposure to trauma has not been attended to, and you go to the next and the next and the next, and by the time they get to a certain stage in life, you just find out that they are more discouraged. Other people that have experienced probably one exposure to trauma will not understand that it's because their own situation has been multiple exposures to trauma. And this is why we cannot categorize. It is not right, it is unacceptable to categorize people in, a particular spectrum of trauma, to just give people a general balm or soothing balm or suggestion on how to deal with trauma. It's important that you know exactly what it is. So number 3, after acknowledgement, number 3 is acceptance. Yes, I accept that I was exposed to this and this happened to me, and that is why I am experiencing this, or that is why this is happening to me in my life. The next stage is grieving. Now, if because of exposure, you have become who you don't want to become, you've become this person that you are right now, right? For you to be able to heal, as you acknowledge it, as you accept it, you need to grieve who you would have been. Because you've lost years, you've lost experiences, you've lost some enjoyment, you lost your ability to, be present, bring yourself presently to your everyday life. And that has been you didn't contribute to any of these things that happened to you. Yes, it was no fault of yours. It was no fault of yours that you probably were raped. It was no fault of yours that you were abused. It was no fault of yours that you were given birth to in the home you were given birth to. It was no fault of yours that you were exposed to the kind of parents you were exposed to that had their own ideology, and you were broken in the process of probably trying to obey parents. It was no fault of yours that you went to the church that you probably grew up in. It was no fault of yours that you were defiled by probably a priest, a man of God, or somebody, an adult that was set over your life. It was no fault of yours that you were staged to be raped by someone. It was no fault of yours. You had no hand in that. It was no fault of yours that your boss always talked down on you. It was no fault of yours, all right? And so, because you had no role in that, however, you have to own up to the fact that, yes, you experienced this, okay? So, knowing that you experienced this, you grieve who you would have been at this stage in your life. Maybe your life would have been different if you were not exposed to that. So, you need to take time to stop, to pause from everything else you are doing and stay at that place where you grieve. You nurse that little girl, or you nurse that little boy that was always shut down, that was not, emasculined, that was not given the opportunity to be himself, that was not given the opportunity to express himself. You have to grieve that person. And if there are things you were not doing, like a lot of men, growing up, they told them, oh, you cannot cry, or men don't cry. And so even when they go through the stages of life that they are frustrated, they are angry about something, they don't even know how to express themselves. They don't know how to be themselves. All right. And so you have to grieve that man. And you now, at this point of grieving, you will realize how you start exhuming those negative energy that has been stored up for the longest time. All right. At this point, you realize you start becoming light. You start feeling free. You start feeling lighter. You start feeling more purposeful. You now give space in your heart, in your head, to now be able to receive love from people. So it's not because you don't want to receive love from people, but at the place where you were traumatized, your thinking brain was automatically suspended. Okay? And so you started, as it was suspended, every time you have a trigger, you are taken back to that point of how you responded to that particular trauma. So if you froze when that thing happened to you, every time you are faced with a trigger, how you respond, or how your brain has been wired to respond, is that you freeze. You're unable to respond. You're unable to do anything. You're just blanked out. All right? And so when you start healing, what happens is, as you get to that point of grieving, you start meeting yourself and you start forming authentic new neural pathways, all right, that will form new character for you. And you will now choose at this point the best way you prefer to respond to trauma or to respond to triggers. Yes, you now start choosing at this point of grieving, what is the best way to navigate going forward? What is the best way to respond? What is the best way to continue my life, so that every time I'm exposed to this, right, I will prefer to respond this way? And you'll be trained, right? You'll be supported in such a way that all those new resolutions you make, all those new pathways or new ways of responses you make, you'll be given tools in therapy on how to navigate, right, and how to proceed. And then the last phase is navigating, or you call it moving forward. Why do you have to navigate? Now that you have grieved your little child, you will need to, going forward, you will need to start. In fact, what that grieving time does, as I said earlier, is that it opens you up to start receiving love. It opens you up to start thinking differently. It opens you up to start making decisions for yourself and not letting your trauma or your trigger make decisions for you going forward. All right. So for you to move from that stage, you will need to make up your mind that the tools you've been given in therapy, all right, you're going to use it. And the process of using it is called navigation. So when you hear somebody say navigating trauma or navigating healing, it means that at this point you are ready to move forward. But there are things you should have experienced, okay, on this journey. So that last stage is navigating, moving forward. At this point, there will be a lot of trial and error, failure and getting up. At this point, it is important that you become accountable. So there are some people that trauma has disconnected them from even their family, which is the basic support system. At this point, your therapist will become your new support system, and you need to be accountable. However, another support system you can have can be your partner. I mean, someone that is trauma informed, that understands that loving you right, being patient with you, being available for you, and loving you despite your shortcoming and your weakness, and being patient with you is a key tool to navigating. So you will need to have somebody. You will need to have somebody. So if you're someone that has already been disconnected from a lot of people, right, because of your trauma, okay, and you don't know how to, and you're going to start learning to reconnect those bonds. So before you learn, while you're navigating all of this, a therapist, a specialist, recovery specialist is supposed to help you, is supposed to guide you, is supposed to be with you as your major support system and teach you how to start now reconnecting with those that are important to you, those that are in your circle, those that are in your dots or your inner circle. That is what happens at this stage of navigation. So there are a few tools for healing. These tools I've talked about. What are these tools? What are these tools? What are these tools? That's what I'm sharing with you right now. One of the major tools is tenderness. Yes. What trauma did to you is that it stuffed you up. It's made you rigid and stiff. All of those things I said about how you like to be treated, your preference, your this, your that, or it has to be this way, you have to act this way, you have to behave this way. If not, you're not lovable. How you've been trying to, put yourself in other people's boxes, right? Just so that you be accepted, you be loved, and so on and so forth. Healing requires that one major tool you will need for this phase is tenderness. You need to become soft. And you learn how to become soft under accountability, under therapy. Or you probably have worked with a therapist before and they've guided you through. You can start making your mistakes while moving forward, while navigating. One of the major tools you would need is to relax. That is why if you're in my therapy room, one of the first things I tell you when I start probably hypnotherapy with you is to relax your shoulders. Relax your jaw, relax your shoulders, because that is when you can start breathing in or taking in peace. You're letting yourself go. You're letting your ego go. You're letting your rigidity go. You're letting down your guard. And you're saying, I acknowledge that all of this has been my experience, but I need to move forward. All right? So at this point, you have to become tender. It is until you become tender that you can start acknowledging that what the other person is doing for you is showing you love. Okay? Another name for tenderness is compassion. The reason why a lot of people are disconnected or have been disconnected is simply because they do not have empathy or they don't express empathy in a way that it communicates life, it communicates softness and tenderness to the next person. All right? It doesn't matter their background. Another name for tenderness is compassion. Think about it as, oh, this person doesn't know my story. They don't know that there's an injury on my wrist, that the wristwatch is covering. And so, whatever their response is or how they address you is from their point of pain. They are dealing with theirs too. And so that is why in therapy, you will now learn to start becoming more accommodating to people. As you see someone come or approach you or interact with you, you can ascertain that, oh, probably this person is speaking from their point of pain, is responding or reacting from their point of pain, and you become more tolerant to them, more accommodating to them, more receptive to them, you become more empathetic to them and to their experience, and in their interaction, you become more patient with them. So, number one tool you need on your healing journey is tenderness. Another name for tenderness, or it can be interused with compassion. The second tool you need on this journey is a support system. All right. So, whether your therapist, whether your pastor, whether your family member, whether your best friend, but you will need to have a support system. In our emotional recovery therapy program that we run, it's a 7 weeks healing program that we run. One of the key things to ask you when you're filling your form to join in is mention your support system. The reason is, in the group, we want to be able to know what task we can give and who is available for you, and how you can lean into that support system. So a lot of people will tell you, oh, I don't have support system. But by the time we get talking in therapy room, you get to realize that they have support system that they don't utilize. So you also hear people say things like, am I supposed to tell them to support me? Why should I tell people to support me? Why should I tell people to give to me? Why should I tell people to call me? Why should I tell people to love me? People cannot give you what you have not placed a demand on. And what healing does for you is that it makes you place a demand rightly, positively. It makes you ask. The scripture says, ask and you shall receive. Seek and you will find. Knock and it will be open. And so you go to a door and you just stand in front of the door, and you're like, the person at the other side of the door should understand or should know that you're at the door and they should open. You're being unfair to them. And you're ripping yourself off the opportunities, the love you should have experienced and enjoyed simply because you've not learned to ask. So another thing you learn in therapy is you learn how to ask for what you want. Asking does not mean you are weak. It means you are knowledgeable and intelligent enough to know that you cannot thrive on your own. If man could thrive on his own, we wouldn't have been where we are today. We would have probably been isolated. We wouldn't have been wired to interact with people, but we have been wired to interact with people. And so for you to be able to do that, you have to be able to communicate. And communication is simply asking, beckoning, receiving, exchanging information. All right? So your support system have to know that you need them, when you need them, how you need them, and they also know what use of what value they are to you. So you have a lot of wounded people going through life like they are alone in the world. They are the only ones giving, always expressing, always loving people, always sending to people, always giving, always acknowledging people, always telling others you're beautiful, and then they are on their own. Why don't people tell you you are beautiful? Why don't people reach out to you? Because of the wall you have put around yourself. However, these walls were first created because of trauma. These walls appeared because of trauma. They were gradually built up because of what happened to you. Do you understand that? And so it's important that you are able to learn to ask for what you want from your support system. And as I said earlier, that is what you learn in therapy. Okay? The reason why I tell clients, the reason why you're unable to ask, one of the major reasons is pride. Pride stands in the way of you asking for what you want, because you feel like, oh, I'm too good to ask them. Oh, I shouldn't be asking them. So you have your prejudices, and these prejudices have formed your ideologies, maybe opinionated that this is the only way. Meanwhile, you have your support system waiting patiently forever for you to just ask them. Can I ask you this question? For the couple of times that you ask people authentically, I mean, for those, I'm speaking to the people that honestly do not ask or say things like, I don't know how to ask. For the times that you've asked people for something, how have they responded to you? Exactly. Your guess is as good as mine. People are waiting, your support system, they're waiting for you to ask them. If only you will learn how to ask right without feeling bad, without feeling judged, without feeling like you're a burden to somebody else. All right? If only you're able to ask. Some people that have experienced, that have probably gone through depression or even taken their own lives, they would have gotten to that point. It's simply because in their head they felt like they've become a burden to people in their circle or their support system, and probably they had nothing else to offer others. All right, that is why they had to do what they did. So the second tool to healing is support system. The third tool is trust. I want you to see how this goes. If you've not learned to be softer and tender, it will be difficult for you to accept to ask for support or even accept support when people are giving. So you know those times that probably people give you something and you're like, no, you need it more than I do. No, go. All of those things you were doing, you were teaching people how to treat you. You know those times that 5 people come into the room, probably all of you are equal, but because of humility or how you were trained, you stand up for the chair for somebody else to sit. Like somebody else is always deserving of honor more than you do. That can be a trauma response. All right. And so every time love has come your way, you always rejected. You always felt like you have to work real hard. And that is why I love Christianity. Why do I love Christianity? When Christ died, he didn't die because we could make up or match up the love. In fact, we can never match up the love. We can never repay that love. All right? In life, it must not always be 50-50. It's okay for some people to give their lives. It's okay for some people to support you. Even, it's okay for you to feel loved, accepted, supported at one time or the other of your life. That is why when you're going through healing, a lot of times I will tell you to drop off some responsibilities, because we have just become humans that are just wired to deliver on responsibilities, and we start going and moving like robots. It's only what I can give. It's only what I can give. It's only what I can give. Or it's only what I can receive. It's only what I can receive. It's only what I can receive. All right? I want you to see that it's two sides of the coin, not just giving. There are people that trauma has made them only lean back, and every time they want to receive, they're looking at what can I grab. So maybe you've been married to a spouse that is like that, or you've dated someone that all they wanted to do was receive from you, receive, collect, and they were not giving you. All right? While they were dealing with that trauma, you don't know, you were also dealing with the trauma of you always had to overcompensate to gain their love, to gain their trust, to capture their trust, or to sustain their trust or their love. All right? So you to be able to come to this to activate this third tool of trust, you should be able to have a support system. It's not someone that has a support system that can trust, that you can give trust or you can receive trust. Of course. All right? So the next phase is trust, and then the next phase is confidence. When you are sure that there are people that can hold forth for you while you rest, while you take a break and start navigating healing and navigating life, then you can start becoming or start building confidence again. Confidence in yourself, confidence at the workplace, confidence in your relationships. And you are not afraid if what you are doing is received or not. You're not afraid if what you are doing is good enough or not. All right? Because you've come to this phase in your life where you know that it is enough. It's okay. You're not in competition with anybody. You're not in competition with anyone, okay? You don't have to overgive. You don't have to overimpress anybody. You just have to be yourself and live your life, okay? And so, confidence, at this point of confidence, you'll be able to hold more comfortable, conversations, more comfortable relationships, and you're not afraid if you'll be accepted, okay? If the way you're loving is good enough, all right? Because your support system, they are not judging you, they are no longer judging you. They are no longer feeling like you have to do certain things in certain way for you to be accepted, all right? So I have an amazing adopted daughter that a couple of times, because of the experience she's had growing up, I tell her, you don't need to do anything for me to love you. However, being in this family and seeing the kind of values we represent, it means that there are things that, of course, you have to grow up to becoming, okay? But whatever you come with, because I've accepted you, I've accepted you. My role now as a parent is to create an enabling environment for her where she can thrive, where she can grow, and then eventually become the kind of parents that will nurture a conducive environment that her children will grow, and then her spouse will also thrive. All right? And so, what support system does is that it creates a conducive environment where you can start becoming, you can start growing confident in. I want you to see how these tools, how I mentioned these tools from top to bottom. I mentioned tenderness, which can also mean compassion, okay? Is the root, it shares the same root word with compassion. And the second I mentioned is support system, okay? The third I mentioned is trust. And then the fourth I mentioned is confidence, all right? Dr. James Leach said something. He said, the healing power of the human voice and what a kind voice can do, is beyond what we can ever imagine. Why is that? All right. So the final is confidence. I am certain that when you get these 4 tools that I've shared with you, you'll be able to eliminate loneliness. You'll be able to increase happiness. You'll be able to retain joy. You'll be able to enhance understanding. You'll also be able to improve on your physical health. A lot of people undermine the effect of mental health on physical health. You can never know until you experience it. So, creating room to heal emotionally, creating room to heal from trauma, okay, will give you the gift of even navigating your physical health. Thank you for joining me today. I'll see you again soon.